Yes.
We started. You ready? Hey, Christy Taylor. Hey, you guys. Welcome to another episode of the warm up series. We have the amazing, the incomparable Christy Taylor. If you guys know anything about media within the Memphis industry, you know the name Christy Taylor. Thank you so much for being on the show, Christy.
Well, thank you so very much for having me on your show. And I just realized that I need to change my title because today I'm not hosting. I'm a guest. I'm
Yes, yes, Christy Taylor consultant. So we'll get into that in a minute. But the reason that I asked Christy to be on the show, I recently realized Christy moved to Atlanta. And, a lot of people look at life, they say, we get to a certain age, life happens. We say, I'm aging, I'm getting older, this is life. And Christy is one of those people that just keeps making moves despite anything. And she's not afraid to enter new realms.
Mm.
First and foremost, before I get started with this interview, Christy, what made you this way?
Ooh, girl. Okay. Um, there are two things that shaped me, and you have aptly named this show "Decision to Live." And mm, what made me this way? What made me consistently go to the next chapter is a desire to live life fully. Um, and I did not early in my life, and we can get into it. I did not want to die, leaving this planet feeling that I didn't fully live. So the thing that motivates me is just at my core is truly the desire to live my life as fully as possible without limits, in particularly the limits that I set upon myself. So oftentimes, people look to the left and the right to see what other people are doing. I tend to don't do that. I'm constantly trying to beat myself. Like I try to do the better version of my next self. And it comes from some drama and trauma. But at the end of the day, at the core is that I did not want to leave this planet feeling like I did not fully live. I want to feel alive. I don't want to just do stuff. I want to feel alive. Yeah, that's a heavy question. Like, what made me this way is the fear of dying unfulfilled at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay. So, what does it mean to live a fulfilled life if you had to describe that
Um,
or a
Shamika,
fulfilling life?
Shamika, it's not a one size fit all.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
I'm,
it's specifically to you.
yeah, I'm speaking to that. It's
Okay.
definitely not a one size fit all. And for me, um, I have to say because and let me give you some biographical stories to kind of feel to lay the foundation. So for those who may or may not know, you can probably find more about me and go to my website. But I was actually born in Washington, D.C. My mom had been Mississippi born, but West Tennessee raised. And at some point, she had lived other places and had ended up in Washington, D.C. Her younger sister had decades earlier had attended Howard University. And once my mom got out of the military, she went to Washington, D.C. and worked in various capacities in the government. She had my older sister, then I'm the middle, and then she eventually had my brother. But in that environment of being born in that city, I was a very quiet child. I was a classic middle child. And success for me, or life fulfillment for me, was always internal. My sister was very gregarious. She would be the one outside playing double dutch, all the things, hopscotch, and I was in the house reading books. My younger brother, when he came on the scene, he was definitely, and to this day, he's a full musician, pulling out pots and pans, banging them in the kitchen floor. But I was that little quiet girl that you sometimes see in families who's off to herself, not because I won't be engaging. If you spoke to me, I would say hi and all like that. But I really lived within myself. And my dreams, my ambitions, the thoughts that I were thinking were all internal. My mom had a vinyl collection that would entertain me. And among her collection, she had gospel albums. She had an Andy Griffin album. I think she had a Big Bad John Wayne, I mean, one of those Johnny Cash album. But she also had a Broadway album from Jesus Christ Superstar. And I would play that over and over again. I fell in love with words. I fell in love with communication, even though I was quiet. So living life fulfill me. Okay, to live life fully for me was about learning how to fully express myself through words, whether that was reading a book, later on writing poetry, later on singing, and as time has gone on, to be able to communicate as a media personality, as a script writer. I have just been on an eternal journey of letting what was in me out through words. That's and is and I'm even now, the little girl in me is stuttering because that's what I've been struggling to do, is to communicate who I am and share this joy, this life, this love I have with other people, to make them feel inspired, to make them feel seen, to make them feel heard. All of that is in me to this very day. That little girl who was, curl up in a corner and read a book, escaping through the words on the page. I've just been trying to escape and share that escape with others. It's endless. I mean, that's what success and fulfillment looks like to me, is being able to fully communicate myself to the world.
Okay, you stated you wanted others to feel felt, and heard.
Yes.
Can you recount the first time you felt seen, felt, and heard? Because you kind of described a time where the first time where you felt like,
I didn't feel seen and heard until I probably reached junior high. Yeah. A lot of the motivation behind me wanting other people to feel seen and heard is because I did not feel seen and heard. I have memories throughout my childhood where, yes, I was selected to, if I want to throw it back to when they would have us do Easter speeches, or I had to do Sunday school reviews, as far as, having to be able to sing in the choir on the back row as a first soprano, or, things of nature. But as far as me being seen as who I am really happened when I hit my junior high years. And it was in that moment that I began to really write poetry and share it. It's one thing to regurgitate what other people have written and things of that nature, because I was excellent at, even in early in life, of being able to read poetry and be an orator contest, things like that. But once I started actually sharing my own words and people responded in a positive way, that's when I began to feel seen and heard. High school, really, when I joined choir and was in the band, and I fully came out of my shell, honestly, when I was 17, 18, when I went away to college. But just imagine living a life feeling like people know I'm there, but they don't know I'm there. Understand? Yeah.
like almost like you felt invisible.
I did. Yeah. Because, people who are amazed that I ended up having a career in radio is because they remembered me being such a introverted child. I was not shy. I was quiet. But I was more engrossed in my thoughts. And this is no fault of anybody else's, other than the fact that I felt that my inner world was more my inner life and my inner world was more impressive than the world I was in, because you also have to put me in the context of growing up in the 1960s and the early 70s between Washington, D.C., which is Chocolate City, aka, ghetto, to growing up in the deep rural South, where grandfather had a chicken and outhouses and wells and, dirt roads. So growing up, oftentimes when you're in society with the abject poverty, or with a lot of things, you have to find a way to connect with the world around you. And I wasn't a very outgoing child. I didn't want to run outside and play. Those were the things so oftentimes, if you're not doing that, when you don't have things to do, you can just not be seen. I mean, you grow up with cousins and they're 8 to 10 or 12 of them, and you're the quiet one. Yeah. You're not making enough noise for anybody to notice that you're there, and they're like, oh, don't forget, it's like that Malcolm in the Middle. It's like you can be the child that gets left at the house because they didn't know you weren't in the car, because you're so quiet and you're not making enough noise. Not that I wasn't loved or appreciated, it's just that I wasn't making enough noise. Yeah.
Going back, so you said the first time you felt seen and heard is when you started poetry. Could you give us a line from one of those poems that you wrote in middle school?
There's this one. I mean, there are different ones that I would do, but one I think I used to say a lot. It was so simple, so simple. Roses are red, violets are blue. When I think of love, I think of you. That was because when you're a deep thinker, everything, crushing on somebody that you may never tell them, but it's like that kind of stuff. I would reinvert other things. I remember later on when I would write just whole entire sonnets. I don't remember all of them, but there would be notebook pages of them. But I would just try to, because I was very studious. I had paid attention in vocabulary and learning my how to rhyme schemes. So I would just write these sonnets. Iambic pentameter, parameter. Oh, I can't even remember what it is now. But I would just be so engrossed in talking about love, and I would crush on somebody. Some guys would probably be amazed that I wrote sonnets for them. But yeah. But yeah, I would just, and then I wrote songs. I remember my songs more than my poetry. And I grew up in church, so a lot of my songs were more God focused. And I remember one song I even wrote. Oh, we had this. The melody is coming to my mind. Can I sing a little bit of it?
Of course you can. I was going to ask.
It was like, my life is just a weaving between my Lord and me. I cannot see the colors. He worketh steadily. It was just a song about how oftentimes we can't see the master's design. And I did have to say I borrowed some of those song words at the time, but I just kind of weave them together. That our entire, which is really one of my favorite songs that I put melody to. And I definitely was in junior high school then, where I was like, we can't see what God is doing, but he's working from a different vantage point. And we just see the loom. If you know anything about weaving, God is just calling threading, and we don't see the pattern. We don't see the design, but he works steadily. He works consistently, constantly in our lives. And that song has actually comforted me throughout my adult life when I am confused, like, God, what you doing? And it's like, you can't see the design that I'm making. And talking to you, apparently the design that he has crafted has been a beautiful one. That was something else. I remember writing songs about, I had this one song that I wrote, and I think I was more in high school, about being a Superman Christian and how you don't need nobody else. I'm a Superman Christian. I can handle this all by myself. And just talking about how when we come into a state of, and I really found myself once I got into songwriting and poetry, but particularly when the lyrics and the melodies started coming together, they started shaping me even more so. I had found my voice. I was a first soprano. I was in concert choir. I was in gospel choirs. And then the songwriting just kind of gave me more ability to open up. Superman Christian was another one. And just by the time I graduated from Millington Central High School, I was around 17, super young, and had gone away to Tulsa to Oral Roberts University, even though my mom had low-key wanted me to stay and go to Memphis State. But I did end up at ORU as a music major. And so I was further fostering that singer-songwriter that was in me, classically training. At some point, I was also in a gospel group that toured around the country. We would get out of classes. Oral Roberts was Oral Roberts University, and he was still president at the time. And they would pull us out of class to go sing on the TV shows. And so I had, was grooming myself to be able to communicate myself very, 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 very well through singing and songwriting. So when I couldn't speak it, I would write it and then I could sing it. Yeah.
Okay, so I tell a lot of people there's a difference between living and existing.
Ooh.
And a lot of people haven't found their purpose. At what moment in your life were you like, hey, this is what I was called here to do? And could you take us
Mm.
back to that moment, and how old were you in that moment?
Okay, going back to, I was very, like I said, I was a very quiet child, but I was a deep thinker. I was very much living within myself. And because I grew up in church, I was exposed, and my mom was deep in Christendom. She had wanted to be a missionary and tour the country and the world. So even though she didn't do that, she involved herself in child evangelism. So even when we lived in Washington, D.C., in our homes, it would be equivalent to like Vacation Bible School. Kids would come in our house and all that. So I knew early on that I wanted to, and growing up in, just mind me, this is me talking. I was conditioned to ask God, what do you want me to do with my life? Like, it wasn't just like I came on the planet, like I really wanted to find out, what did God want me to do? And as I began to develop and find my voice through song and singing and and writing, not screenwriting, songwriting, I initially just thought God wanted me to be a gospel singer. And, I was being groomed, Shamika, to also be a preacher's wife, because I grew up in church. My mom was involved in missions. We would be there, extremely involved in church ministry and outreach and, anything in the church. Every time the church doors were open, my mom had a key. So I literally was growing up Baptist and Church of God in Christ, very, very trenched in church culture. So going away to a Christian university, majoring in music, it was like I was just on this preacher's wife track. However, I didn't feel ministry the same way my friends did, because it used to be a thing to want to be a preacher's wife. Like, hey, that's like first lady, honey, first lady, y'all bow down. No, but I felt in my quietness that there was something, and I don't want to say bigger, but bigger than that vision for me. And it was, so from 7 years old, I accepted Jesus Christ at 7 years old, 9 years old, 9 years old in Bright Hill Missionary Baptist Church in Jamestown, Tennessee, in Tipton County, on the morning's bench, palm baptized, coming up with the green algae. By the time we moved to the city, I really dedicated myself. And, by this time we're Church of God in Christ, full-fledged, because my mom always would go to Baptist and Church of God in Christ, Pentecostal churches. And then by the time, by 7 and 13, I was like, it's me and God. God, what do you want me to do? I'll use my gift, my talents, through my voice, through my singing, through my speaking. And by the time I attended Oral Roberts University at 17 as a music major, I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to be all the way music. Broadway was also part of that ambition. Wanted to do stage work. But it was while at Oral Roberts University that I had my first identity crisis. Yeah, I was probably about 19. And I had made a decision that I didn't want to be classically trained. And I was singing in a gospel group that was started by Carlton Pearson. And he, by this time, my cousins also, who had been there years earlier, they had been a part of this legendary group, Souls of Fire, Singers and Choir. And I was a part of that legacy. So it was all about ministry. It was all about evangelism. And, many amazing people have come through that choir group who have led mega ministries. But I didn't feel called to that. And I found myself in an identity crisis that I didn't feel called to ministry as my friends were being called to ministry. And I had started asking God, what do you want me to do with my life? Because remember, I grew up in church. He was always asking God, what do you want me to do? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my mission? And it was through a series of, at 18, 19 years of age, asking God, what do you want me to do with my life? That he asked me a question, which started me on a journey of self-discovery. He said, what do you want to do? And I had grown up always, God tells you what to do. And I'm like, wait a minute, God, you don't ask a question with a question. I had learned enough English, to know that you don't answer a question with a question. He said, what do you like to do? And I had to, within my young self, I liked music and I had learned to start talking. So I said, I like talking and music. And in that moment, it's like the universe opened up and I saw my life in infinity around 18, 19, that radio and television could be my route to blending those two things. I could communicate and I could listen to music all the time. And that really started me on a lifelong journey of self-discovery. And it really has been that kernel of truth and inquiry that God also started teaching me early, that you hold the answers to who you are.
So you talk about spirituality and being a believer. So as we know, God did not give us a spirit of fear. You
Mhm.
do not seem like a person who is led by fear at all. But
Woo!
what I'm realizing, a lot of people are paralyzed by fear, and time progresses and they stay in the same position, not necessarily because they don't want to get out of that position, but because they're scared of what may go wrong. How do you move despite fear? Like, how do you keep going despite maybe having moments of doubt or fear?
I just put a couple of weeks ago a video about self-doubt. And, because I'm trying to learn how to get out here in these internet streets, in a different kind of way beyond traditional media, and really allow myself to be open to being more vulnerable online. So when I did that post, I was just speaking about literally me getting online and how I have allowed myself to be paralyzed for years by simply showing up online. And it doesn't make logical sense because I have done stage, I have toured, I have sung, I have, bright lights, I have been on radio. Millions of people have been listening to me. I've become comfortable on television. However, the internet, like, really, Christy, like, really, like, you scared of the little internet, the little phone. So I made that post, and I had, and the response to it was what you said, like, you're afraid, like, Christy Taylor, like, I'm Christy before I'm Christy Taylor. So let's establish that. Before I'm Christy Taylor, I'm Christy. I'm that little girl who's still in the corner, reading a book with thoughts in her mind, feeling unseen, feeling unheard, having something to say, needing to find the way to say it through her written word, through her song, and then through radio. And now, how do I show up online as authentically as I can, with something meaningful to say? Because that's the other thing for me, is I have to show up meaningfully. It has to be passion. It has to be purpose. So if I don't connect with that, then I don't. So let's take that as an example. How did I move through this? I literally took inventory once I got feedback, like, then what am I afraid of? So then this is my system, ladies and gentlemen. When I come to a place within myself where I am facing down any inkling of fear, self-doubt, insecurity, confusion, I pause and I meet her. I have a conversation with that part of myself and say, what are we afraid of? And why are we afraid? It's the self-talk for me. It is the self-talk for me. It has saved me many, many countless times when I just pause, shut the noise out around me, and I have that inner dialogue. And I have, and if I'm running scared, the bigger version of myself who has found ways to work around the self-doubt or the fear, I'm like, girl, look now, look stuff we already done. We've been that girl. What you scared of now? I was like, even if I have to take it back to in elementary school, Gilted in Tipton County, and I used to love being selling. My first famous moment, and maybe I can say that that's when I started really, because I fell in love with words and in spelling bees, and and I remember how quietly ambitious I was. And I rose to be, one of the champions, so I can go back to that. I can go back to when I did learn how to, I got a poem, and, saying like, I want to share my poem. And they let you go on, and do that. And I overcame that when I decided, when I was in choir, and I would raise my hand and who wants to lead this song? My hand slowly, what I'm saying? I had the capacity to do it, and I had to so each little hurdle of me, when I literally had friends in high school who were amazed years later that I became chatty. And I literally rode the Trailways Greyhound bus from Memphis to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I made a definitive decision that I wasn't going to be quiet on this new campus. I was going to, and I literally made myself, I would go up to people and say, "Hi, I'm Christy Taylor. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. What's your name? Where you're from?" I literally made definitive decisions to overcome whatever wall. So whenever I approach something, it's the inner talk for me. It's that inner dialogue. It's the "why are you afraid, Christy?" And if it's an unnatural fear, going into spirituality, I'm like, "Okay, God, you got to help me with this one." So that's literally how. And I have friends who feel like I am fearless, and it's not. I'm not minus fear, but there's a saying that used to be back in the 90s and early 2000s: feel the fear and do it anyway. Now, I have gone skydiving. I have crisscrossed this country. I have traveled on $5. I don't advocate none of that to nobody. I have just but I also know I can't do anything if I don't feel the passion for it. I don't just jump out of planes just because. It has to be like, I have to do this. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're a Gen Xer. So there are some people who have always been paralyzed by fear. And if we
Oh,
go back to, even middle school, when you started doing poetry and you started being more bold and, introducing yourself to people, what advice would you give to someone who's always been paralyzed by fear, but in adulthood, they need to be empowered? What would you say to that viewer
oh my
who?
God. This has been part of my pain as a friend to so many people from my generation who they live within self-imposed prisons. And if anyone ever comes to me, I'm going to be that friend that's going to be like, "Okay, let's get to the root of it." I mean, I got my own therapist. Okay. Matter of fact, I got a call today. I keeps myself, with that, but I will step into a role like, let's go into that sacred space of yourself. And like, Shamika, what's really going on? Like, let's get past the facade. You're highly educated. You can do that thing. You got the track record. So why are you afraid to move forward? Now, I have had friends that will give the allegory like, "Well, Christy, you will jump off a cliff, bungee jump, all the things without a good parachute." And I'm like, "Yeah." And you will go to the store and get a brand new one, take training classes, and still, cry at the edge of the cliff. It's like, but the truth is, if God's got us, and this is where I truly believe, if you feel inspired, like you feel in your soul that God or your truest self wants to do something and something is holding you back, then it's in that moment, like, do you believe God? And see, most of my friends are faith-based. They grew up in church like me, or things of nature, or they found faith and they claim it. And I kind of come to my religious upbringing from a more intellectual perspective now. Either God is the truth or he's a lie. Did he tell you to do it? Yes or no? I mean, it's like, let's take out it's not 1,000 different, variations of this. Either he said, "Go part the Red Sea," or he didn't. Then if he said, "Go part the Red Sea," part it. That's my belief in God. And I also have developed over a lifetime a belief in myself. And when I'm doubting that self, I sit with her and say, "What are we afraid of?" Because it's a collective. You want to go back to when that happened at 7? Oh, you want to remember when you got shunned at 16? There's always a trigger. Let's go sit with that. And have we lived past that moment? Have we succeeded past that moment? Have we achieved past them? Have we loved? Oh, girl, come on, love, baby. What? Have we loved past? Have we lived past that moment? And I have made decisions over and over and over again to live life. There is in my 20s, when I was at one of my lowest, I've had many identity moments where I had to find out who I was. And the death of who you are comes in different waves. But it doesn't have to kill you. I want to say that again. The death of who you are comes in different ways, but it doesn't have to kill you. There is always the 7-year-old version of yourself and the 17-year-old version of yourself and the 27 and 37. Hopefully they won't be the same. Hopefully it's evolution happening. Hopefully there is growth happening. Hopefully you're becoming a better iteration of yourself. And with that means that the previous version, the 2.0 version, has to surrender to the 5.0 version. But before you can get to the 5.0, there's a 3 and a 4.0 version that also has to show up. And I constantly give myself grace and space to become her. I did not come to this planet just to be one version of myself. And that is what at the beginning you say, I do not want to live and die unfulfilled. I want to have been seen and fully heard. And the only way I can do that is to speak. And if there's something that is preventing me from doing that, I have to overcome it.
So one of the biggest things to me that I've learned as I've, gotten older is your community really shapes and molds you into who you will become or who you will, they will either stagnate you or push you forward. How do you go about cultivating the right community, and how do you know when it's time to just let certain friendships or relationships go?
Okay, I will tell you the truth that I keep a very small circle. I love everybody. I love everybody and everything. I love, 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 love. But I don't allow everyone access. Okay, growing up in entertainment, you have the audience, you have the front door, you have the ticket, but only a few people can go backstage. Only a few people got front row access, backstage access, VIP access, and everybody can't come to rehearsal. Everybody can't see it in the raw. They have to see the finished product. So I determined for myself based on my gut and my divine intuition, the discernment, and I'm still learning that. I still journal and speak to that. Like I want to be in the right room with the right people, but I have a history of also showing up in the right room with the right people and people still doing wrong things. So I still even now have to sharpen my intuition and discernment. So I just now know but I was always particular as a little girl, going back to like, hey, if your energy ain't right, you can't sit beside me while I'm reading my book. You interrupting my flow. Okay. My sister used to get whoopings because she would interrupt me. And I'll get to screaming and my mom would, chastise her, go back outside. You leave Christy alone. I knew how to look. If you interrupt my peace, I know how to kick and scream. So if people come into my life and I start feeling that weird energy, male or female, I'm gone, or you are. It's just that simple for me. That's a non-negotiable.
So the clearest thing to me is that you love yourself. I can see through this through and through. You love you. And
it wasn't always their way, Shamika, but it wasn't always their way.
How?
It wasn't.
Because I do a lot of interviews, a lot of panels and things like that. And there is a spirit of brokenness in a lot of people. And
yes.
But I see some people who are so whole and I know it's spiritual and it's the events that shape and mold our lives. How did you begin your journey of loving yourself, and what advice would you have for women? Because if you don't love you at the root of things, you will continually age and make decisions based on how you feel about yourself.
I'm going to give you something, and it's nothing that I have ever not discussed. But it's nothing I always talk about. The Me Too movement came a couple of years ago, and it was really talking about women who had been abused sexually or physically. And I remember posting a hashtag Me Too, and so many people kind of like were amazed by that. But yes, as a little girl, in our movement, in various situations, even from DC to Tipton County and later on in life, there have been moments where one of my poems that I wrote was a girl ain't safe in this world. where there were people who took advantage of my naivete, my innocence, my childlike, my quietness, the fact that I wasn't outside playing, oftentimes. And I used to, at some point, I would be very ashamed that I would stay in the house, because sometimes that can cause those who like to prey on the quiet ones. And I didn't speak up. And I always felt a lot of guilt and shame with that. That even caused me, by the time I made it to junior high school, to really go within myself. And that's where the poetry and the songs saved me. See, there's always the undercurrent to the why. I was already quiet, and the trauma drove me deeper within myself. And what saved me was me finding a way to speak. And it came through the pen, it came through the poetry, it came through the song. And it came to the point where, as even in my 20s, when I was living in Detroit, in pursuit of and having learned how to come out of my shell and to cloak a lot of things, and growing up in church, oftentimes, particularly when it comes to sexual experiences and sin, it's all of a sin. So I had to learn how to navigate that even in my adult life, because I didn't want to come across as easy or promiscuous just because something had occurred to me as a little girl. And I had to, in my 20s, when I hit my major identity crisis, it drove me to therapy, because I was trying to understand why things weren't working for me, why there were glitches, why there were when I was in a very deep self-loathing state, where I did consider, even in the junior high years, and even in my adult life, when I was trying to learn how to love a man, where I did want to just exit stage left, because I couldn't figure it out. And it was in that moment of a friend telling me, you and I grew up in church, and prayer was the answer to all things. She hadn't grown up in church. So she was like, girl, you need therapy. And thank God for that friend, because it started a journey of self-awareness. It started a journey of finding my root. It started the journey of understanding where I began in trauma, where the trauma and drama begins and ends, and where I sit with it all. And it has informed me as a human being to be very intentional with myself. If the energy changes, baby, I'm gone, or you are. Okay. That's a non-negotiable, because I've already been there and I've already done that. And I know the seeds that can be planted when you are in toxic relationships, whether that's with family, whether that's with friends, and God forbid if it's somebody that you call a lover, and I have decided that the person who's going to love me the most is going to be me. When Whitney Houston came out with The Greatest Love of All, honey, that was like my theme song. What? The greatest love of all starts inside of me. And then I had to also, going back to my spirituality and my relationship with God, I remember living in Detroit, going through, like I said, that season of really coming to grips with who I was as a person and as a woman. And I was like, I blamed God for everything that had happened in my life that was painful. Or trauma, drama, family situations, whatever. And I remember God telling me, I didn't tell you that. He started showing me that there's a difference between religion, there's a difference between God. And the one thing I said, well, God, what did you tell me? He said, I love you. And when between the seed of him saying he loved me and putting me on this path of discovering self-love, learning how to erect boundaries, learning where I wanted to live within myself, and how getting back to that little girl, like there was nothing wrong with me sitting in the corner reading my books, but I did need to also know how to get out the corner and cut somebody if they come up on me. Okay, let me go and take you. All right.
Okay. Okay, so I know, if I know one thing, I know you will advocate for yourself, but I also know a lot of people who get lashing out at people in the moment of, because they're hurting, they're going through, and they take lashing out at someone as self-advocacy. How do you know that? How would a
I gotta
person know?
interrupt you. I gotta interrupt you.
Go ahead.
There was a chapter in my life, Shamika, where that was my go-to. Like I was going, baby, cloak and dagger, whatever, butcher knife, whatever. I mean, I'm just figuratively speaking.
Okay.
Figuratively speaking, there was only one time I did want to chase somebody down with an ice pick, but that was when I was a little girl. But anyway,
Okay.
but until I learned how to use my words, where I could tell you up front. I used to wait till things built up and then I would explode. And I realized that this was for me. Yes, those people could never come back into my life, but guess who was left to pick up the pieces of what I had destroyed? And after a couple of those situations, I was like, dang, me going off on people leaves me to clean up the mess, because the person I destroyed the most was me. It's like that saying about anger and hatred and bitterness. You're trying to poison somebody else, but you're the one dying. That's what happens when you don't learn how to communicate to others what your needs and wants are, what your boundaries are, what you will and will not accept. And that comes through conversations, being also intuitive to what they're actually saying, what their needs are, and not putting yourself in relationships and friendships where they've already communicated to you things that you know you will never be able to supply them. And most of the anger and the toxicity comes when we overcommit ourselves to people who are demanding from us things we never want to give. To thyself be true.
Yes. So last question. So
Okay,
we
because
gotta keep going back to the Lord, because
yeah, I mean, I can't be here without God. I mean, like,
yeah.
legit.
So that's
Literally
my
not.
last question is rooted in that. So years ago within my career, this lady told me a Bible scripture. She said, "Therefore I cast you out as a sheep among wolves. Be wise as a serpent, but
Serpent,
harmless
but
as a
sweet
dove."
as a dove.
Okay, so what is your takeaway from that quote, and how can you tie that into the conversation we had today and empower the listeners?
Okay, so let me go back to what you really have this all about, which is deciding to live. And our vantage point can be many things. We can see ourselves either as the wolf, we can see ourselves as the sheep. We can see ourselves being hurled, or we can see ourselves as choosing to go out into this with a sense of autonomy and agency. And your decision to live, how you see yourself in the story, will determine how you play it. If you're cast in a stage play or a movie and you are a wolf, you're going to act like a wolf. If you see yourself cast in life as a sheep, you're going to always be headed to the slaughter. I choose to see myself in every situation as someone, and hear me as I say this, because you just brought the scripture. I see myself as, when God sends me out into the world as a wolf and or a sheep, it serves a purpose. I'm giving you my worldview. I see myself co-creating with God. He came to be slaughtered as a sheep, but God definitely is a lion. So how you see yourself cast in your life is how you're going to show up and how you're going to behave and how you're going to perform. And so I made decisions every single chapter of my life, Shamika, that whenever I felt death, don't ever attempt true happiness entering into my mind, entering into my script, into the words that I begin to speak. Then I had to make a definitive decision to live my life in full expression. I literally came up with moving from death to life means moving from I can't be happy to I will live in full expression. If you look at my social media, and if you ever get into a real conversation with me, I'm very attuned to the power of words. The little girl who understood alphabets, who fell in love with spelling bees, who fell in love with poetry and songs and script writing, all like that. At the kernel of it, what God was really trying to teach me was the power of your words, that the universe that is still expanding right now, the person that I'm speaking to literally came from a word spoken. And you're ever expanding. And the life that we are living right now is literally linked to the words that we are thinking, the words that we're emoting, and the words that we are speaking. And all those things can be true, because oftentimes, well, I didn't say it, but if you meditate on the thing long enough, it connects with your kinetic energy. And that is really what creates your life. And then the words you speak confirm it. So I'm extremely attuned to what am I speaking about myself. That's why I sit with her when I feel the wall and I make a decision. Oh, we finna live past this, sis. We finna live. We're gonna turn into the version that I want to become, not the one you're afraid to become. And I write words. I remember making a reverse journal. So to your point, I choose to see when we use scriptures like this, look at the subtext or any colloquial statements, things that are loosely based on scripture, because all things are not based on scripture, but it is, within the context of that is, how do I see myself in the context of that script? And which one is the truest version of me? Because I can't be made in the image of God and slaughtered without resurrection.
Because go ahead. I was like, on that note, because we're wrapping. I went a little bit over because you just kept dropping. We may need a part 2 to this interview.
Hey, anytime, because let me tell you, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I'm looking to share more of who I am with the world, the true depths of who I am. A radio career is based on the fact that I learned how to use the power of voice, and it is directly linked to the breath that God gave me. And I understand that every time I take a breath, God has purpose for me. So every time I speak a word, he has purpose for that word.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Chrissy, for joining us on the Warm Up Diaries. Say bye.